Uh-oh, the
We're
light's
starting.
on now. This is incriminating evidence.
It's true. So first, thank you so much for indulging me because I have wanted to do this for years and I'm so excited. So we're just going to start and the first thing is just tell me your full name.
James Wallace Hoefer.
Lyle Robert Hoefer.
Bonnie Josephine Hoefer. Do
Make
you want
name.
Lucio? Bonnie Josephine Lucio.
Linda Condre Hoefer.
Okay. And when and where were you born?
San Diego, California, December 16th, 1941.
San Diego, California. July 1946.
July what?
July 22nd, 1946.
I was born in Orange and
Orange County.
County in California, not Florida.
What city?
And Orange.
Oh.
It was because the hospital is located in Orange.
Oh.
And that was April 6th, 1947.
I love April 6th.
London, England, July 10th, 1945.
Wonderful. Do you know anything about the home that you lived in when you were born?
Oh, yes.
So can you describe the hometown, and not just your home, but your hometown? Like what were the circumstances in the world when you were born?
Well, this is San Diego, California. This was 9 days after the start of World War II, Pearl Harbor. I tell people the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. They recalled my dad to active duty. It made my mother so angry she retaliated with me 9 days later. The whole world has been regretting it ever since.
Now, did you live in the same home when you were born?
Oh no.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was born in Mercy Hospital, still standing, still actively in use. We lived on Maryland Place, which is a little cul-de-sac.
We'll get to that. We've got pictures of that house.
Okay, you got pictures of that house. I remember that house. And my mother says, you can't remember that house. We moved out of there before you were 6 months old. I remember the house.
All right.
And I think it was a naval hospital I was born in. But all I can remember, the first place I can remember is El Toro Marine Base in, what do you call it, a suburb? Anyway, in Santa Ana area.
Okay.
And we lived in a Quonset hut as a family. And that
And
very
now describe for me, what is a Quonset hut?
Quonset hut is how do
A
you-
temporary.
It is,
It's a temporary, made out of metal.
it's an oversized steel culvert.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is very interesting
Round.
because
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
round. When we moved to Australia, the church we went to
Was
was
the
a
same.
Quonset.
What's a Quonset hut?
Yeah.
All right. What about you?
Okay, I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital, and I don't remember the house that they took me home to. I've seen pictures of it, and I know it was on 2nd Street, but the first house that I remember was 1722 West 5th Street, Santa Ana, and we lived there till 1960.
So quite a while after you were born.
So,
Wonderful. Linda, what about you? You were born in London.
I was born in London because my father was an American soldier in England and he married an English wife. And presto, I came along.
Tends to
And
happen.
almost exactly 9 months later. And then when he got sent back to the United States, we lived with my grandparents in England first. Then he got shipped back to the United States, and my mother and I followed about 2 months later. And then the first house that we lived in was 6 months in my grandparents' house in New Jersey, Camden, New Jersey. And then we got our first house that we lived in Lindenhurst, Long Island, New York.
Wow. All right. So, Dad, I know that you have a lot of really early memories before most people can actually remember life. So describe for me your earliest memory.
Oh, heavens, it's my earliest memories. Mom playing the piano in the living room.
Wait, I didn't know Nana played piano.
Yeah.
And, oh golly.
Be nice.
One of my earliest memories was thinking I could outrun my mother. I was still in diapers, you understand.
Sure.
and I had gone out the front door and around the porch. I was on the front lawn, headed for the neighbor's house. And my mama said, "Jimmy, come back here." And I tried to outrun her and was amazed how quickly she caught me.
Lyle.
There's next memory to it. The Quonset hut would have been in Santa Ana again, and we lived in a when it was an enclosed neighborhood. I
Okay.
remember that very well because we knew each other fairly well and the neighbors. And when it came to trick-or-treating, we went around to people's homes and we invited in their houses, and they, in those days, made their lollies like popcorn balls and candied apples, and they had punch and things like, and you were invited in. So, and I remember being taken around, my mom dressed, I think, in a typical white sheet as a ghost. It was the cheapest way to go, you know, when we do these things. So remember that. And also we lived not far from the, well, we were surrounded by orange groves. And we lived not far from a guy named Wrongway Corrigan, who had a historical perspective. And he lived in this house that I used to walk by when I went to school.
I was his newspaper boy,
Yep.
and he never tipped, and he always demanded the paper be on the porch every time, but he never gave a tip. He had a reputation for being a type 1.
And I do remember trying to jump off the roof as Superman, you know, in a little flying cape.
And what was the consequence of that?
Well, I didn't get hurt. I don't
Oh, well, there you go.
And those are funny days too. Like we when we had fireworks on the 4th of July, I remember taking all the old powder from the ones that we lit off and put it in a glass jar on the front porch and dropped a match in it. And for some time, I think even after we moved, there's this burnt spot on the porch, and fortunately I didn't get hurt. So I remember that one.
Got to tell you why he got the name Wrongway Corrigan. He was the owner of a small private plane, and he wanted to go to Ireland, and the government would not grant him a clearance to go to Ireland. So he filed a flight plan from New York to Los Angeles and landed in Dublin. And he claimed he was reading his compass backwards.
He was going the wrong way.
That's right, he got the name Wrongway Corrigan.
Nice. Bonnie, what's your earliest memory?
I think my earliest memories are at my grandmother's house. Because we were fascinated with she had a lot of canaries and parakeets, and she had a piano, which we didn't have. So, you know, I just remember being there, and typical older home, you know, and you had a separate dining room and, you know, your separate living room, and kitchen was very small. But yeah, I like to spend time with Grandma.
Nice. Linda, what was your earliest memory?
Well, I remember mostly from pictures that I've seen. I don't have a good memory of my childhood. So I remember having, my father had a great big thick tow rope hanging from the rafters in the garage, and he would climb it like this with his feet straight out, and because he'd just come out of the army,
Right.
you know, and he wanted to stay fit, and so I wanted to climb it too. And so at a very early age, maybe 3, 4, I remember climbing up that rope. And I was a good rope climber by the time I got to school. And then fixing my dad's motorcycle, I'd sit on the ground, and he'd ask me for a wrench or something, and I'd hand it to him. And fishing, we used to go fishing right when I was little. They had to tie me down in the boat so that I wouldn't fall out. Yeah, because I don't know how old I was, but I saw
Top heavy, huh?
Yeah, my swell head. But from the pictures that I have, they tied the rope around my waist so I wouldn't fall in.
Nice. So Dad and Lyle, tell me about your father. Tell me his name, his birthday, his birthplace. Let's just go to that part.
Edward Carl Hoefer Jr., only he went by the second because he didn't want to be called Junior. Born in Spokane, Washington, July 10th, 1910.
I don't remember all that.
Can you tell me his parents' names?
Oh, yes. His parents' name.
Yes.
Mm,
Give you a hint. Ida Bell
Oh, yes. Ida Bell.
McDonald.
McDonald.
Yeah.
McDonald, because she married again after Edward Carl Hoefer the first died.
So what was her maiden name?
Give me a minute.
Well, while you think about it, you think about what her maiden name was. You tell me. Just share me in 5 words. Tell me the character of your dad, and you guys can start thinking about your dads.
5 words.
Ida Bell McDonald.
And he was caring and a strong man.
Caring and strong. That's 2. Give me 3 more.
Okay, strong man. I guess I remember a lot about his military background, where he was. I saw him in uniform, so he was. His temper was similar to what he learned in the military. Tended to be a little aggressive.
Aggressive.
And
I like that dichotomy: caring and aggressive.
yeah.
Oh, he was.
He very, very aggressive sometimes. Oh, he loved using the razor belt, didn't he? But he also smoked very heavily, so that was not a good thing.
Yeah, they killed him.
Yeah.
He was.
What was your grandpa's name? What was Edward Carl Hoefer Jr.'s, the second's father was
Well, yeah, he was just.
Edward Carl Hoefer.
Yeah, Ed. His friends called him Ed.
Okay.
Interesting story Lyle brought to my memory here. Dad was 100% United States Marine.
Stereotypical.
He achieved the highest enlisted rank possible. They offered him a field promotion to lieutenant, and he said, make it a captain, and they wouldn't. And he said, I'm not going to be no shave-tail lieutenant. And people these days don't understand what a shave-tail lieutenant means. But in the early days of the Army, the muleers would shave the tail of a new mule put into the string. And that shaved tail meant you do not load this animal with anything like vital, like food or ammunition. You can use pots and pans and beddings and anything that won't be harmed when the animal falls off a cliff. By the time the hair grows out, they know whether the animal can be trusted or not. Okay, so that's a shaved tail lieutenant. But we think of a Marine as swearing like a sailor. But at home, Dad never raised his voice. He would, when Dad went soft, you sat up and paid attention. But one day, Mom walked in on him in his office. She went to pick him up at work, as it were, and he was disciplining a Marine for some sort of misconduct. And Mom said the air was turning blue. But he never used that language at home. And an example, I borrowed the family bus, with Volkswagen bus, to do dune bugging, and I destroyed all 4 tires. And Dad never even got angry. He just shrugged it off as what teenagers do. So, but boy, if you crossed him, that razor strap was real handy.
Oh, yes.
And Mom learned to use it too.
I do remember that one word which very strong in his vocabulary, and the word was damn. That's his strongest.
Yeah, that's about the
cuss word
strongest
you
thing he
wanna
ever
call it.
said.
And that was, if he said that, you stood back. And I do remember seeing Jimmy and our other brother Buster, as we called him, being belted with my dad, and that was enough to make me try not to have that happen to me. So I was a good boy. I tried not to do anything that was going to anger him, because I knew that if he used that belt, it hurt, and it was a razor strap, which was used in the Marines when they shaved the hair, the 2 leather thing with a heavy metal.
My parents had a leather strap.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, leather
And
belt
used it
over a
handily.
canvas strap.
Oh yeah, it was very painful. I think I might have got it once.
If Johnny misbehaves, hit this kid beside him, it'll scare him so much he'll never misbehave
And
again.
the other thing interesting too about my dad, two other things, was that he was a featherweight champion boxer.
Yeah.
So it was interesting when I saw pictures of him when he was young, with his boxing gear on, but also was the fact that he played the bugle. And now I didn't know that at all until I came to Australia, and I've been playing trumpet, thinking, well, maybe there's a reason for that musical background.
I didn't.
You're gonna love this,
Yeah.
Lyle, I don't think you knew it. My dad was the original Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B. He was the Bugle Boy of Company B.
There we are.
I didn't know that.
But, yeah, he played the bugle beautifully. But like Lyle said, if he said damn, you knew you were in trouble.
Bonnie, tell us about your dad. What's his full name, and his
Okay.
birthday, and his birthplace, if you know that.
His full name was Joseph Gomez Lucio, because the Gomez was his mother's maiden name, and that's what they used to do. And he was born on April 16th, 1923. And because we come from a Mexican-American family, we're very close. But he was a quiet man. He wasn't a very demonstrative man. But I think that was par for the course in the 50s. You know, he was there, and he worked hard. He worked several jobs to provide for 6 kids. And, but, you know, he just was really a very loving family man. And part of that was due to the fact that he was an orphan by the time he was 14. Both parents and 2 siblings had died before him. So he had to go out to work to help support so that his brothers could go to school.
Okay.
No, 5 words.
Oh, 5 words to describe your dad.
Oh.
Thank you, Linda.
Quiet, loving, funny sense of humor, enjoyed eating, and he was the top boss in the house.
He was the man in charge. All right. Okay, Linda.
Well, my dad was Frank George Scott Jr. And he was born in December 16th, 1917 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And he was a strong man. He was built he's 5'4", 125 pounds, soaking wet, and good muscles from going up that rope.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't a loner, but he must not have had a lot of friends, because I don't remember people coming over to our house a lot. So if he had any friends, they didn't come over. My parents didn't entertain. And he did a lot of outdoor things, but he wasn't a hunter or a fisherman or a hiker, but he'd ride his motorcycle, and then we'd go fishing, and he'd do the garden in the backyard, and he loved to travel.
Okay, so 5 words.
5 words would be wiry, strong, arrogant sometimes. I can't honestly say loving. I don't think he really wanted a daughter. He wanted a son.
Yeah.
And so he never gave me dresses or built me a dollhouse or anything like that. And I got a sandbox that he built. So he loved me, but he wasn't what I'd call a loving, put your arm around the shoulders type person. And then I never heard him swear at all, ever.
Wow. Nice. Okay, let's do the same thing for your mother. Tell me her name and her birthplace and a birthday.
Dorothy Louise Wallace. Never memorize her birth date. That was one of
Do you know
those.
it?
No.
December.
That was one of those things in our generation. You did not ask a woman her birthday.
She was born the 29th of March, 1917.
I knew the 1917, didn't know the other bit.
We actually celebrated her birthday this year because this year she would be 90 years old.
Wow.
No, 100 years,
100
sorry.
100 years.
1970. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we actually celebrated, we had cake, Mom made a cake for her, and the family all got together and celebrated her birthday.
The gag goes like this. Mommy, how old are you? Son, that's a question you don't ask a lady. Well, where were you born? That's the question you don't ask a lady. Well, how much do you weigh? That's the question you don't ask a lady. And then a few minutes later he said, Mommy, I know how old you are and how much you weigh, and I know that you got an F in sex. She's reading her driver's license.
So, and did you say that she was born in San Diego?
I believe that is correct,
It is.
because her mother and father lived in San Diego. And,
So I want to show this.
okay,
So
oh,
here's-
that's a good shot of my mom and dad
Here we
in their
go.
wedding.
There we go.
Now, I will tell you,
That's it.
Mama was not only good looking, but how many men was she engaged to at the same time? 3?
2, yeah, 3.
What are you looking at me for?
Because you saw it too, you read it too. You thought it was fun. Yeah.
Actually, your mother's journal, her life story that she wrote,
Right.
is what has inspired this.
Oh, yeah.
Because my full name is Dorothy Ann Hoefer, and I was named after her. And I never really knew her when I was conscious. But when I was 16, I was given her biography, her autobiography to read. And I'm very much like her. And at the time, I had 3 different boyfriends. And I read her story and went, oh my, I'm very similar. So,
Reminded me of Janice.
that's what you told me.
Well, I've got to tell you.
So can you give me 5 words to describe your mom?
Beautiful, talented, perky, that's only 3.
I can give you social.
Yeah, very sociable.
She entertained neighbors.
Had a lot of friends.
Loving?
Oh, definitely, very loving. Sensitive.
Okay.
Um,
Got any stories about your mom, Lyle?
Stories about my mom. As I mentioned that one, again, it goes back to the second place I lived in Santa Ana, where she had the neighbors come around and have coffee and tea and coffee cake, and we had an organ that we bought. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember the
It had a
organ.
record player in the organ, so you could learn to play the organ through the record, which is very interesting. So that was kind of my earlier experiences with
She
music.
got that organ, by the way, because she won a percentage off in a raffle at the county fair.
Frugal.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I'm hearing lots of similarities
And
with me in this
I
lady.
do remember too, is the one place I actually put an electric end of a plug in my mouth.
You
Survived.
too, huh?
Yeah, I survived it. And that was that house.
I wrapped a bobby pin in a piece of rawhide lacing and stuck it into the electrical outlet. I'm told I was burned. I don't remember the burn, but I remember the pretty sparks and Grandma having a cat fit.
All right, Bonnie, tell me about your mom.
Okay, my mother was born in Wood Lake, California, on January 13th, 1923. And
Her full name?
her full name, she was named, it's a name that's common apparently in Mexico, which was Gobercinda. And then her mother's maiden name was Mercado, so that was the middle name. And then the surname was Reynoso. But she didn't like that name because it's not common here in the U.S., so she went by Cindy.
So Gobercinda,
Mercado,
Mercado,
Reynoso.
Reynoso.
So,
And she went by Grandma Cindy.
Yeah, Grandma Cindy. So, and She was always a very active person. You know, always, you know, she always exercised. I can remember exercising to Jack LaLanne. But she was a very good cook
I was gonna say that.
and often had people around for meals. Very creative in her artwork, sculpture, sewing, you name it, she did it. And she loved gardening.
Okay.
Linda?
My mother was Joan Gladys Wyatt, and she was, all the family was born in England. And,
Do you know her birthday?
oh, let's see, May 14th, 1925. And I don't know what town in England. I think it was just London. London. And my mom was, sometimes she was shy. When she felt uncomfortable around people, she wouldn't talk too much because of her accent. But then she found out that everybody loved the sound of her English accent. And so after about, when I was around 10, she was by that time outspoken and spoke her mind. Very intelligent person, even though she wasn't educated. She was like Grandma Cindy. She could knit, crochet, cook, garden, very talented. I can tell you a little anecdote about her. When she came over from England, she told me she didn't wear underwear because during the war they weren't able to get any in England, and so she just got used to not wearing it. And then I found out later it was because my father wouldn't buy her any, wouldn't give her enough money to go out and buy. He didn't let her buy a winter coat or extra underwear or things like that.
Was money tight or was he
Money
just
was
frugal?
tight, and he was frugal. He was a frugal guy. But my mom could do anything. If she was interested in it, she would figure it out or read about it and could do anything. She got me into my first pet was my mom set up a big mayonnaise jar with dirt and put ants in it and black cardboard around it and stuck it in a big bowl with water. That's the first pet I ever can remember. And how many mothers actually will bring snakes and spiders and ants and what have you into the house and try to teach you about nature?
That's wonderful.
And so my mom, that's why I turned out to be a zookeeper, is because my mom got me interested in animals. But she was very loving. She was the opposite of my father. And she cooked great because anytime I was sick, I always got bubble and squeak. Well,
What's
bubble and
squeak?
bubble and squeak
Do you
is
guys know what bubble
Yeah,
and
we
squeak
do,
is?
we do.
leftover potatoes,
Yeah.
usually from the night before, and an egg, fried or soft boiled, put on top of it, and whatever leftover veggies that she had. Most of the time, it was cabbage, chopped up cabbage. So I don't know where it got its name,
Because cabbage squeaks.
maybe.
Bubble and
It's
squeak.
very,
No,
very
you-
popular in
and-
Australia.
yeah.
That's how come we've heard of it. It's used quite
They
a
have
bit.
it there.
But it's probably a very strong English background.
Remember
So-
the snakes?
Lyle mentioned a Halloween costume, and I just happened upon this picture of Nana. Is that? I can't tell.
Doesn't focus very
I
good.
can't tell from my angle.
There, that's,
There,
that right there, that's the best focus.
So that's Nana, apparently dressed up like a clown. That's Dorothy.
Oh,
Lyle.
yes, that's my mom.
And neither one of you mentioned how educated she was, but that has been something
Yes.
that always impressed me about Dorothy. And this is her graduation picture. There are others in here, so she was married before she graduated.
Yeah.
That's quite amazing.
So my next question is, can you name your father didn't have any siblings, so that one's easy. But can you name your mother's siblings?
Well,
If you
my
need-
mother had a brother, we called him Uncle
Wow.
Willard, and a sister, Janice. And my father had half children, half brothers and sisters. He had his sister, his half sister, beautiful woman, never got married, and two half brothers who preceded him in death. And I went and visited Aunt Marion one year when I was...
I think I have pictures
Uh-huh.
of that in a minute.
And Aunt Marion told me about Grandma Minnie. And Grandma Minnie would have been my great aunt, was 102 years old, living in Wisconsin. And I went over and...
Now, I think you threw in a couple too many greats there. Because Minnie would have been Edward Carl Hoefer's mother, I believe. I'm pulling it up on family.
We called her Grandma Minnie. And she wasn't really a grandmother, she was an aunt. So it might have been my grandfather's sister, not mother. But I don't know. Your mother has my genealogy, so she'd know that. But anyway, I went to see Grandma Minnie in Minnesota. She was 102 years old. Her son and daughter-in-law were taking care of her. And shortly after I left them, they put her in a rest home. She was, as the saying goes, deaf as a post and blind as a bat. But if you could get through to her, her answers were very lucid. And they took her into the rest home, and she told the manager, she says, I'm 102 years old, it's your job to see that I make it to 103. And she did. And I was talking to her about my grandmother, Grandma O'Hara. When my grandfather passed away, Grandma O'Hara was taken in by the Catholic Church and supported herself as a foster parent for the Catholic Church.
So this was Ida Bell McDonald.
Ida Bell
Hoefer
McDonald.
O'Hara.
Now, Ida Bell McDonald was McDonald, her grandmother was a Mohawk Indian.
Which one? Was it Phoebe or?
No, Phoebe is Grandma O'Hara's sister.
Phoebe is also Grandma O'Hara's grandmother.
Perhaps, I'm not up on that.
But, so do you know the name of her grandmother that was an Indian? Was it Martha Ann Goyer or Phoebe Provost?
Would have had to have been Phoebe Provost.
Okay.
But the stories that I remember my grandmother, Grandma O'Hara, telling me
She would have been born in Ontario, Canada, so that would make sense.
was that, now this is an interesting fact here, you mentioned Ontario, Canada. The Mohawk Indians are a fair-skinned Indian, American Indian. And Edgar and I went, Edgar's an old friend, Edgar and I went to the Mohawk Museum at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington and saw some pictures of them. But the storyline goes that Grandpa McDonald came over from Europe and he married an Indian woman. Now, I don't know her name. Grandma O'Hara had a tintype of her, beautiful in her wedding gear, white.
So your grandpa would have been Wellington McDonald.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Grandpa McDonald
Married.
married this American Indian, was a Mohawk. And they had a son. And because he was neither Indian nor white, both races rejected him. And it made him
Crazy.
Yeah, it made him an angry young man. And he had a brutal temper. And he would beat his daughters, Marion and Phoebe, okay? And Grandma Minnie told the story that he hit Phoebe so hard, it scrambled her brains and she was never right in the head after that. And Grandma Minnie told the story of Grandma O'Hara had taken in this young woman, 16 years old, as a foster child because her mother she'd been taken away from her mother because she was unfit. And there was a restraining order against the girl's mother, that she wasn't allowed to come within 50 feet of the house where Grandma O'Hara was taking care of the child. And so one day she came up and she stood out in front of the house on the sidewalk, yelling at my grandmother for letting her 16-year-old daughter date an Italian, who she referred to as a wop. And that ticked off Grandma O'Hara, who walked out on the porch and yelled even louder so the whole neighborhood could hear her. She said, "Who are you calling a wop? You're an unfit mother."
Oh, no.
And that was the end of that.
Wow.
But Buster,
Your brother.
my brother, Lyle, my older brother, and I were visiting with Grandma O'Hara at her house in Minnesota, and there was a lake out back. She had a Great Dane dog. The dog's name was Duke, okay? Now,
Do you remember that, Lyle?
she told Buster wanted to go out in the lake and swim, and Grandma O'Hara said, "No, you don't go in the lake." Well, he went out in the lake and went swimming anyway, and she sent Duke after him, and Duke went out and grabbed him and brought him back. She told me I wanted to climb the apple tree, and she said no, and I climbed the apple tree anyway. I wound up sitting on a stool with a dunce cap in a corner.
Oh, my.
That was some of the memories from Grandma O'Hara.
I do remember that she was one who, for some strange reason, I remember, taught me how to make a bed.
Oh.
And the last time we saw her, she had visited us, and she was not very good. She was not good health. And I remember she was such bad health that my mother actually had to spoon feed her at the table. And when she went back home, on the way home in the plane, she passed away. And that's the last we knew of her.
Grandma O'Hara tried to teach me how to pronounce our last name correctly. And I never could get it right. And I was doing ordnance work in the Los Angeles Temple, and I had 23 names that I was working, and one of the workers spoke German of the dialect that my family was from, and after 23 times of him saying, "Brother Hoefer," having the authority, and so on and so on, so we got all 20, after 23 times, our name is pronounced as if the H-O were a W-E. It's Hoefer.
Yes, I've heard that.
And now my son, Edward, served his mission in Germany, but it was the wrong part of Germany. So he never learned that, and he still to this day doesn't understand how to say his name correctly.
It's interesting because in Australia, there was only one or two other people with that name in the phone directory. Later on, when I was teaching at a school, I was asked, do I know somebody, Hoefer, in one of the primary schools? And I said, no, they're there. And so now I'm discovering there's a whole bunch of them living just down the road from us, named with the same, spelt the same way, by the way. My understanding the reason it was spelt the way it was to Americanize it. They took the umlaut off, and it would be pronounced Hoefer, which is more American. But we've had this guy somebody calling up often asking for this Bernard Hoefer.
And I'm listed in the phone book
I said,
as B. Hoefer.
yeah, because Bonnie is listed in the phone book, B. Hoefer. So they thought that was me. Anyway, we eventually met somebody who knew this guy, and we went to a German, what do they call it?
It was a winter solstice.
A solstice celebration, and we met this guy, and it was very interesting because he told us the correct pronunciation as well, which I had never known before. So he gave us a bit of background information on that name, but we still just do not know in any way whether they're related. Now, there was actually, it came in Australia, an American conductor composer with the same name as well. And guess where he was from? Minnesota, St. Paul, Minnesota. But he could not tell me whether his dad was related to us or not.
The reason is, it's very interesting. The reason there are so many Hoefers is because the name derives from, take your pick, either the keeper of the king's gate or the gardener at the king's gate. And so there were all kinds of kings all over what is now Germany, because a king wasn't the ruler of the whole country. He was like the county commissioner, if you will. He was not nobility, but an official. And so there were lots of kings in Germany, and many of them had, of course, had gardeners because that was the agrarian society. And so there are lots of Hoefers out in Clark, where we're living now. Our next door neighbor is named Hoefer. No relation to us whatsoever. But someplace back down our family lines, we were related to somebody who was either the gardener or the gatekeeper for a king, someplace down the line. So that's where our name comes from, is how it comes that way. But
Now, the place that my father's father's father lived in Germany, I can't remember.
it's Neustadt.
Yes, Neustadt.
And there are several Neustattens.
Well, we were visiting the museum in Washington, what do they call
We went
it?
to the Holocaust.
The Holocaust Museum.
Oh, the Holocaust Museum.
And they have a sort of a bridge going across with glass and framed it. And on that is the name of various places. And guess what? That name's on there as one of the places.
Yeah.
Neustadt.
The problem is there's more than one Neustadt, which literally means new village.
Oh, is that what?
Okay,
Awesome.
so there were all kinds of new villages cropping up all over the place, so that's what they were called, new village. And the Neustadt that our family comes from is in that part of Germany that is now Poland,
Yes.
okay? And
There was an indication that the Hoefer name may have come from Dutch rather than German,
yeah,
It's near the border there.
because it's near the border.
so.
Okay, is that your grandma Ida Bell McDonald? Your grandma O'Hara?
Oh no, this is San Diego. That, I do not recognize.
Okay,
No,
try this.
Sorry, but maybe.
Wait a minute, that
is
could be
not
Grandma
true.
O'Hara, yeah.
I think that's Grandma O'Hara, the one here in the back. She's the bigger lady.
Yeah,
She was a big lady.
yeah, she was a large woman. I think that might be her in the background, but
It looks,
She-
I
but
think it is.
that's 4318 Maryland Street in San Diego.
That's where she came to visit.
Check this
Yeah,
one out, because
she must have come to
I think
visit.
she might be in this one as well. So let's see if I
All right, that's my mother on the right, and that's my sister,
There's Janice.
and her,
Janice.
Aunt Janice, Grand Jan, we
do
called her.
believe that this one right here is
And,
Grandma O'Hara.
No, I don't see her.
That's, I think that's my father.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
her father.
that's Dad.
So the names are
Oh,
actually on the back of that
I
one.
recognize this girl. She's my second cousin twice removed, but I can't remember her name.
Let me read you the names off the back.
Okay.
So you've got Helen McIlvaine, Ed Hoefer,
Yeah.
Philip C. Hoefer,
Yeah.
Okay.
Minnie Hoefer,
Right, that's Grandma Minnie.
Lois Hoefer,
Okay.
Dorothy Hoefer, and in front, Jim Hoefer.
Yeah, but there's no,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't say who the other people are. So
No.
that, show that.
Jim, what about the Achenbach?
Oh, we'll get to them in a minute.
Oh,
yes.
the Ach and the Bach.
I actually have a lot of pictures of Achenbach. I've been going through this box while you've been telling
Yeah,
the
but,
stories.
I
I don't have many. This is more the
have-
Wallace
We have a
box.
very good picture of her.
Yes, there.
Yes.
in our- over our.
So this is a similar picture from that same time period. But for some reason, I thought these pictures were taken
Okay.
in Minnesota.
Oh, that's Ed McIlvaine.
Yeah.
I remember Uncle McIlvaine. He was, the crutches, we went to visit Uncle McIlvaine
I
in
remember.
his home.
And he had a car fixed up for him so he could drive it.
Yeah.
I remember.
Was he not able to use his legs?
No.
Oh, no, his legs were totally useless. They were sticks attached to his hips.
What had happened to him?
I think it was polio, but I'm not
Or
sure.
might have been.
But, you know, that was, but I remember we got to his house, we got inside the door, and he leaned the crutches against the wall next to the door. And then just on the strength of his arms, using the furniture to support, he moved around the house like an orangutan.
Well, you can see his arms are very strong.
Yeah, just on the strength of his arms, he tables and chairs and counters and whatever, and he moved around the house without the crutches all the way in the house. He was a gunsmith by trade, and he had a gun shop where he made custom weapons for people, and he was very successful at it. He was a very wealthy man, but and he was fun.
So, I know you.
They took a Volkswagen bus,
Mhm.
and they took the seats out of the back, and they put 2 Mercury V8 engines in the back, and they slaved them to the Volkswagen engine in the boot, right? And he tells about the time that he was pulled up alongside a stoplight in downtown Los Angeles and running on the Volkswagen engines. And some guy in a hot rod pulled up alongside and revved his engines. You know, that's the way that was a symbol to drag, race you across the intersection thing. So unbeknownst to the poor guy in the car next to him, he pulled a lever which engaged the Volkswagen engines to start the Mercuries. So he had about 650 horsepower sitting behind that Volkswagen bus. And when the light changed, he did a wheelie through the intersection.
Oh, boy. Bonnie, do you know your parents' siblings? Did your dad have any siblings?
Yeah, my dad had an older brother, Antonio, who died from the lung disease that miners got. And he had an older sister, Clotilda, who died in childbirth. And then there was, after Dad, there was Uncle Robert, Uncle Adolf, and Uncle Aurelio, Uncle Mike, and his youngest sister, Rachel.
Wow.
So those were the ones, you know, from Uncle Robert on were all left behind when his parents died. And Mom had 2 brothers, Joseph Reynoso and Trino Reynoso. Joseph was he worked for the fire department in Santa Ana, and Trino was in the building trade for a while, and then ended up in his latter years as like he helped clean schools and stuff like that. And she had one sister, Connie, and they were close. So I think there's about 4 years difference between the 2 of them.
Wow. It's a big family.
It is a big family, and lots of cousins. Everybody's cousins.
Very fun.
You know about that, don't you, Dolly? Big
Little
family,
bit. My
uncles,
house right now?
cousins.
Linda, what about your folks? They have siblings?
My mother had one sister named, what's her name? Sheila Wyatt. And she got married and had 5 kids. So I had 5 cousins, but I never met them because they're all in England.
Right.
My father had a brother and a sister, and he was the oldest. So then my Aunt Betty, her name was Betty with an E, B-E-T-T-E. And then my Uncle Robert. And my Uncle Robert only had 1 child, so there was me and my cousin Jeff. And then my Aunt Betty had 3 children. And I have lost them. I don't know where they went. Susie, Scott, and Lisa. And that's the extent of my family. I was an only child, and I had my cousins, my 4 cousins.
There you go.
We have 11 minutes left.
Well, no, that's just 11 minutes of the first session. We actually get a second session.
Oh, we get 2 sessions. Oh, good.
I had a feeling that you two brothers were a little bit on the verbose side, so I planned my time accordingly.
All right.
Dolly, can I tell you one interesting thing
Yeah.
about me? My mother and I, when the Army sent for the war brides
Mm-hmm.
from England, they came over on a number of ships, but towards the end of the deployment back to the United States, they used the Queen Mary,
Really?
and they painted it navy gray, and they called it the Gray Goose. Now that ship is in Long Beach, California right now, and I got a chance to go on it. So my mother and I came over on the Gray Goose in March 3rd, 1946. So I was,
So during the war?
no, 46.
Oh,
Just after.
just
Just
after.
Just
after.
after the war.
I got a
And-
picture of me in the radio room. That's when I was born.
And I did get a chance to go see it about, boy, that was after we were married, so that was less than 8 years ago
Yeah.
that we went to Long Beach and I got to see
That
it.
is really cool.
So a lot of people don't know who the Gray Goose is.
I've never heard of
It's
it.
the Queen, the original Queen Mary.
That's amazing.
She painted gray to help evade the submarines.
Yeah, imagine.
Sure. So we talked about Grandma O'Hara and I almost called him Uncle Ed, Grandpa
Yeah.
Hoefer's parents. So let's talk about Grandma Hoefer's parents. And do you remember her parents' names?
Oh, sure. I was named after her dad. He was James William Wallace. And he was a jeweler by profession. Interesting story on that one. In his youth, they still had apprentices, was how you earned a trade. You signed on as apprentice and you worked for free. You worked for nothing in order to learn the trade. After you became sufficiently skilled, then you became an apprentice and a journeyman and finally a master. Grandpa Hoefer, Grandpa Wallace, we called him Gamper. That was Brother Ed's problem. He couldn't say Grandpa, so it came out as Gamper. One day, Buster was playing in his playpen, Edward was playing in his playpen, and Grandma had given him a toy rattle to play with, and he smashed it on the edge of the playpen rail and broke it. And she said, "Why, you little Buster." And the name stuck, that's why we call him Buster.
Oh, right.
Anyway,
So James
Gra-
William Wallace.
Grandpa learned his trade as a jeweler, became a master jeweler. Now, one day, I was a computer repair technician. I was sent here to Salt Lake City to, what's the name of the big jewelry company here downtown Salt Lake?
Shane
Anyway,
Company?
what is it?
The Shane Company?
No, much bigger than that.
Bay
Anyway,
Jewelers?
anyway, doesn't matter. I went in there to repair their computer. And on my way out, I stopped to look at some jewelry in the display case in the back room. This is the jewelry that only their best customers get to see. These are the high rollers that get taken in the back room and look at the really expensive pieces. And I saw this jewelry in there with the name Jessup as the manufacturer on it. And I turned to the clerk behind was store manager, I guess, and I said, "Jessup, are they still in business?" And he said, "Oh yes, they're still in business. My grandfather used to make jewelry for them." "Oh no, they made jewelry for your grandfather." And I said, "No, Mr. Jessup came to my grandfather's shop in person. He looked for all the world like the planter's peanut, with the spectacles and the spats and the shoes and the cane and the three-piece suit. And he came in and gave my grandfather a sketch of something he wanted made." Well, it seems that my grandfather apprenticed under Jessup and became a master jeweler under Jessup.
Yes.
And so Jessup would then bring work to my grandfather, who was now an independent jewelry maker. And that gives you some idea of how skillful he was, in that one of the most famous jewelers in the country brought work to my grandfather to be done for him.
And that was it. Our grandfather was known as one of the best jewelers in San Diego.
Oh yeah, one of the best jewelers in the country, really, because when Jessup brings work to Grandpa, you know it's got the Jessup name on it. It doesn't say Wallace on the name, it says Jessup on the name, because they paid for it, commissioned it.
And so that is your Gamper.
That is Gamper.
And what was his wife's name, Lyle?
Grandma Wallace.
Marie
Wallace.
Marie Antoinette.
Yes, I remember.
And Grandpa always called her Tony.
Tony, yes.
And that's,
And tell me about her, because here's one of her holding Buster. And well, now we called him Gamper.
we called
Lyle.
her Gaw.
Why did we call her Gaw?
Ga?
Because
Same reason he's saying, because I couldn't pronounce
Grandma.
grandma, so I think.
Ga. And I have to show this to
You know, that's the same house behind her. That's the same house as in that other photo that I said was Maryland Street.
Right.
That's,
And that's in El Cajon, right?
no, that's in San Diego. 4318 Maryland Street. Walking distance from the San Diego Zoo for a 6-year-old child.
There you go. So this is just my favorite picture of Grandpa Hoefer,
Yeah.
because
I think we got that
I've got a
picture.
couple of teenagers who love that style, who dress like that right now.
Now that's Gaw and Gamper and Grand Jan,
Yeah, but we've got this picture.
Yes,
my mother's sister.
yes.
We've got this one. Why?
Oh yeah, that was,
That's very, he looks like a
that's the gangster era
gangster. Yeah.
clothing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the gangster era of the
He got a
40s.
good pose for that.
Right. Do you know who the man standing with him here is?
That I don't.
His name's Port Glenn.
Oh, Port,
No,
yeah. Glenn, he had a television shop in Riverside, California.
I remember going into that shop and, yeah, learned a little bit about doing television work. How to test tubes out, remember? They
So
had
this
old
picture was
tubes.
actually taken in 1938, in February 1938.
Well, he must have been around for quite a few years more after that.
Port and Egg.
But I do remember the television. And yeah, when color came in, he knew about the color.
So so of your Aunt Jan and your Uncle Willard,
Right,
which I just recently learned that everybody else in his life called him James or
right.
Jim, because he was James Willard Wallace. What do you remember of them?
Oh, well, we're down to 3 minutes, so
You're talking about Uncle Willard and,
Uh-huh.
oh, jeez.
Uncle Willard, and we call her Grand Jan. I don't know what your kids call her.
Aunt Janice.
Aunt Janice.
That chance.
Willard was a war hero, literally.
Yeah.
We've got some stories for him coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you're flashing now.
Yep, 3 minutes.
All right, I think we ought to save Willard and Perky and Vicious for the next episode, because we're just about out of time on this one.
And so, well, let me see. I thought I had.
But
A lot we know about Uncle Willard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Well,
gave us a
he-
silk map
He gave her,
that
well,
they flew the gliders with.
yeah,
Really.
his daughter gave us these silk maps. And because in the wet weather,
I couldn't have paper.
they couldn't have paper, so they could see the maps, the silk maps. And also, she had jewelry that her father, that my grandfather made for her, and she had a special ring that he put inside one of the bricks in the building where he worked in his jewelry shop. It was an adobe brick, and it was her hiding place just for her. And she went back to get it. When the house was sold, they asked the people if they see it, and they allowed her to go back in, but she just left it there.
Oh.
And I don't know if you remember, you were with us. We went to go and find out about this house, if it's still there, and see if we could find out about the jewelry. And no, it's completely changed.
Yeah.
It's been sold. We did a bit of peeking around the place, and we know it's the right place, but it's quite different. So
I helped build it.
I actually have pictures.
so did I. Helped to put the bricks down on the, mud brick. Down
Uh-huh.
on the-
Okay, we're gonna cut this off and get him, and then we'll start back up.
Did you
I
ever
think we
make
could
the
do this
adobe?
20 more times
Yeah.
and still not get it all.
Yeah, with the straw and the oil. Put it in a cement mixer.
There wasn't any straw, it was oil.
No, but it had straw too.
Oh, I don't remember any
Yeah.
straw.
No,
It
no,
was
straw
Ready
was
to
to
start round
strengthen
two.
It must have been for
Yeah.
a different phase of the construction, because when I worked on it, it was 16 shovels full of dirt and a quart of crude oil.
Yeah, I do remember the oil, the dirt, but I did also use straw,
Hmm,
like they give the horses, you know.
yeah.
Because that was to strengthen the bind.
You can go ahead
Yeah,
and
well,
stop it.
The oil was to